I haven't been playing as much Go as of late, and that's mostly due to just being a lot busier in the holiday season. I've got a lot of plans and I got a lot of places to be, but another reason may be that loss that I had recently that was particularly painful. I had a corner sequence. This wasn't like an opening corner sequence. It was more of like a fight, and I was just reading to survive here. And when I reviewed the game, I looked back on that particular moment when I had to make some kind of move to escape. There was a sequence that could have easily saved my stones. My eyes were not going to those stones on the board. Like, I did not think to read out a branch of moves that was just next to all the reading that I was doing for the part that I was looking at. And it was really, really, really painful because as soon as I just kind of looked at that section of the board, it was obvious what I could have done in order to get an advantage there, but I just couldn't think to read there. I just wrote it off, and that's one of the biggest challenges about reading is, not only the reading itself, but when to read, where to read, and I just really should have done a little more due diligence there, but it's hard with the time control, with the time management going on. You don't necessarily always know where is the best place to use your time. But I will get back into it. I will come back strong, and especially, maybe I'll use this holiday break as a way to just kind of absorb and just give myself some time to learn from my mistakes. Welcome to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And the topic of discussion today is mental toughness, psychological stuff about Go, just overall all this stuff that I would consider soft skills of Go. So when you're going for a job interview, you have like the stuff you're actually skilled at, like the technical stuff that you know how to do, the skills that you've acquired throughout your career, the things that you're actually knowledgeable about. But there's also the soft skills that you don't really necessarily put on a resume, like how do you deal with people, how do you deal with criticism, and things like that. And that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about today in the Go world. So because we got our practical knowledge, like your standard stuff that you would talk about in any other episode, like Fuseki and tactics and reading, things like that. But there's a lot of stuff outside of that applies to us when we play the game of Go. A lot of psychological, mental stuff. And I came up with a list of a bunch of spheres of psychological influence for the game, things that we as Go players need to be good at and work on and be conscious of as we play the game. And I'm going to go through each of them with you, and I want, maybe this can be a moment of self-reflection and see where we stand on some of these psychological aspects of the game. The first one that I have here is flexibility. What I mean by flexibility is how quickly can you shift from different futures? How easily do you bounce back and change your plans in order to suit the situation that you see on the board? If you're not a very flexible person, you may be stuck on one outcome, and you may hold on to that outcome long after the chance for that outcome to occur has passed. Everyone, I think, as a Go player is guilty of this. They've gone through moments where you expected a certain result, and even after you realized that it wouldn't work, you kept on playing as if it would. Maybe you had like an inkling of hope to see if you could actually get it to work, even though it just seemed like it was not going to work. Or if you're very skilled in this aspect of flexibility, are you ready to change your plans at a moment's notice? Are you constantly looking for different ways to interpret the board? I think this is one of the biggest skills that we can develop as Go players, especially I think transitioning into the SDK level. This is one of the things that we should always be working on. And I think this mental aspect is probably one of the more practical mental aspects than the other ones that I'll go over later on. But flexibility. How easily can you change your plans? How easily can you shift your vision of the board? The next one is concentration. Are you able to give a consistent amount of effort throughout the entire game? I know that sometimes I can slip up at a crucial moment in the game, and I've been playing fine all game, and that sucks. That's the worst. It's not a good feeling to have to be careless a couple times in your game where otherwise you've been pretty good. So the question is, are you able to immerse yourself in the game enough to the point where you can provide a steady stream of your knowledge and skill and fight and not think about other things and let other things distract you? Are you easily distracted? Can you concentrate on the game for a long period of time? And I think this skill is also very related to our practical Go skill, because the more you're thinking about the board, the more you're thinking about the things that are happening on the board, I think the easier it is to concentrate. The lazier you are, the less reading you're doing, the less thinking you're doing about the strategy of the game, I think it's easier for your concentration to break. So that one is something that I think it's really frustrating when you lose due to lack of concentration. And it's just something that I think every Go player just needs to develop. And I think this is a very much a skill that will apply in other areas of life as well. Next, I have resilience. How easily are you discouraged during the game? So this is more of an emotional thing. When you feel like you've lost, when you lose a big group or you fail at some part of the game, how well do you recover from that? Does your play fall apart after you feel like you've lost? Do you lose all your fighting spirit? Do you resign too quickly? Okay, here's my thing about OGS players. A lot of you resign way too quickly. How many times have I had a game where that was even, and like I was losing basically the entire game, and I managed to capitalize on some mistake that my opponent made, and it evened up the game, and my opponent resigns. And I don't know how much regret they might have after seeing the AI evaluation was that the game was even, or even in their favor. I've had games where my opponents were winning and they resigned because they're so tunnel visioned on a particular result on the board. So this kind of relates back to flexibility as well. I don't know why so many of the OGS players resign so quickly. I think maybe a lot of it has to do with the kind of like the OGS players are more respectful and they think it's proper to resign when you're losing, and they try to do that more frequently. But come on, if you're winning, or if you're even strength, or even if you're like only a little behind, you should not resign. I really believe that it's just something that you have to want the win. You have to fight for the victory. I think this is maybe one of my stronger soft skills in Go, resilience. I fight tooth and nail. I mean, it becomes bad when I am playing and I have clearly lost and I'm still investing time into the game. That's also a skill to work on, to know when it's time to give up. But I think when in doubt, don't resign. If you're sure, like if you're pretty sure that you've lost the game and like you just cannot see this coming back in a way, then yeah, resign. But if you have some idea, maybe some possibility, if you could see this happening where you might win, if you've seen your opponent make mistakes that you think that you could maybe capitalize on later on as well, don't resign. That's just my little like soapbox moment here. It's like Fox players never resign. Like, I mean, they do resign eventually, but they're very resilient. And a lot of them do like insist on playing every single endgame move even after they've completely lost. And that can be a little annoying, sure. But I think that I'd prefer that over someone resigning way too early and not playing the full game to their, the best of their abilities. So that was a resilience. The next one is volition. It's related to resilience, because resilience, I'm talking more about if you're down, how easily are you able to come back? How can you deal with your emotions about like the negative emotions that come during the game? Can you forget about those and move on and find something new? Volition is, do you want to win? How much do you want to win? And do you try to win? Are you putting your all into the game? Like, are you trying to make the outcome of the game a win for you? Or are you just kind of lazily playing? Are you just a little too laissez-faire, right? Are you trying to just put the stones down where you see fit and say, I don't really care if I win or lose. My strength will come out. Whether I play this game one way or another, and I'm just going to see what happens. Or are you really in the game and trying to take advantage of every opportunity that you have? And do you want to win? Like, I think there's a very different landscape of people among the Go players who either want to win very badly and don't want to win as much, and they just like playing the game, which is fine. But I do think that the strongest players are ones that really, really want to win. The next one is creativity and resourcefulness. This one, I love this one. I think this is a skill that I really want to develop and have. Can you make something out of nothing? Are you always looking for a solution? Are you able to find value in places that people may not find value? Are you able to see things that other people can't? Can you see, do you believe that there are possibilities out there when the situation looks grim? So all these skills, they kind of, when I'm talking about them, they kind of blend into each other because they are related to each other. But creativity specifically, I want to talk about because I think it's such an important skill for someone to look at the game and try to find very unexpected moments and interactions with stones. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Go is you think that like the stones interact a certain way, and then you find this move that just opens up the world, and it's incredible. And I think if you've done a lot of life and death problems, you may know what I'm talking about, because some of them are, my favorite problems are the ones that are simple but also difficult, because you look at it and you're like, how the heck does this work? How are you supposed to solve this? And when you find the solution, you realize it's something crazy, unexpected. You're supposed to, something counterintuitive. You put your stone, underneath like two of the other stones with a shortage of liberties, and somehow, this typically terrible move is exactly what you need for the situation. So how much do you believe you can find things like that and little things that to tip the game into your advantage? The next one, confidence. This one is a very, I think a very interesting one. Confidence. Do you believe in the moves you play? Like, how is your disposition as you play the game? This was a very interesting point that was brought up in that book that I love called The Master of Go, where players fall into two camps. They're either the anxious type who are always doubting, not satisfied. They don't like any of the moves that they play. They're critical, and they're just kind of shifting around in their seats. and slapping themselves in the face all the time. I'm sure we've seen video of Go players like that. Or are you the type of player who plays down a move and is just completely solid and just that's the move you believe in, that's the move that you like, that's the one move that you think is the best? I think 9 times out of 10, I'm the latter. I'm the one who completely believes in the moves I play. I feel very confident in my play. I don't have much like self-doubt when I play my moves. But, you know, I'm not saying one type of player is better than the other. I think the confident player is a happier player, though. But I'm not saying that the confident player is necessarily a better player. The anxious player may be better at finding their own mistakes and finding better possibilities. The confident player may be better at just asserting a specific flow of the game and shaping the game to their will, but they will also have their own weaknesses. The anxious player may overthink things, right? They may overanalyze. They may think too hard about certain things when it's actually just a pretty simple situation. The confident player may be false confidence. Plenty of times happen to me. I play moves and I think that's the one that's going to solve the whole situation, and boom, my opponent knows better than me, and they know how to shift the situation back into their own advantage, and I realized my confidence was misplaced. But it's I think it's just kind of like, what kind of player are you, and what kind of player do you want to be? Do you want to be a confident player? I think confidence does help in a lot of ways where you are playing against someone, and if you do feel that confidence, it can really help shape the game. But if it doesn't, then you know, you may have to check yourself and lower that confidence a little bit. The next one is composure. Do you have control over your emotions while you play? This one's an entertaining one to think about. If you've looked through your own games and the way that your opponents have reacted, I think this is a big part of the game. How much do you wear your emotions on your sleeve while you play the game? Me, I'm a very stone-faced player. It's first of all, like, I don't think it's good to show what you're feeling to your opponent, because then they can use that to their advantage. That's my just personal view on it. But I also just naturally don't think that I emote very much during a game. Just as just like my disposition just doesn't change while I play the game. But not everyone's like that. It's funny because like my dad is when he plays, and I've seen this from others as well. When I play a move that kind of messes with his situation, he'll groan audibly like, and you know, there's a lot of like frustration noises that come out and things like that. And me, I really like don't like giving my opponent that information. It may be stupid. It may sound stupid to some, like, oh, I mean, what are you gonna do? The board is the board. But I really pay attention to the psychological aspect of the game, and I even can try to pay attention to where my eyes are moving when I play. Like when I notice my opponent staring at the board at a certain corner, I'm like, oh, this person is trying to think about like a way to kill this group that we had previously agreed that was alive in our earlier play, but they're staring at it now looking for Aji. So I'm going to spend some time to look for Aji there and make sure that it's solid. And I think that's actually, you know, a very, very interesting aspect of the physical over the board game. Of course, emotions are definitely at the table when we play online, but they typically, it's a lot harder to read. You can definitely feel it sometimes, the way they click down stones, the types of move they play. It's a very interesting interplay between this, like, you know, it's just like a grid of stones, and you can feel the opponent's energy and emotion through the board. It's funny, like, you just know, because you've been talking to each other through this language of Go, and you just know what each of you are feeling, and it's an interesting experience to say the least. But composure, Do you control your emotions while you play, or do your emotions control you? Let's think about that for a bit and see where we stand and see where we want to go. The next one, we got a few of these left, like 3 of these left. Empathy. This is very on topic with what I had just discussed. Do you know what your opponent is feeling? How your opponent feels about the game? It's very, very different when let's say you're losing the game, but your opponent thinks they're losing. They will play differently, and they will make more mistakes that will allow you to open up the game for yourself. And I think to know how your opponent is feeling about the game is a very big advantage. And empathy may sound like a positive trait. I couldn't think of like a more neutral. Empathy is usually associated with a positive trait, but I think it can also be used in a more manipulative way. Do you ever play psychological moves that you know will trip your opponent up? Do you have a friend that just says like, oh, I hate when people play these moves that are like, that just don't make sense, or I hate when people play Tengen, right? And then do you play those moves for that opponent because you know they don't know how to deal with it? That's a psychological warfare aspect of the game. And it's part of the game. It's not something we can avoid. And it's better to know how your opponent is feeling. It's better to know how you're feeling while you're playing the game. Although we shouldn't focus on it as our like main thing to focus on throughout the game. But it definitely serves as an advantage when you do know certain things that are going through your opponent's mind. The next one, courage. Are you brave? Do you take risks when it makes sense? Or do you lean too much into safety and predictability? Do you have fighting spirit? Now, don't mistake this courage for recklessness. That's the balance we have to find here. Being reckless and overplaying and stuff is different. But are you able to recognize when there is a risk that you have to take, and do you take that risk openly and immediately? Or are you kind of scared and do you kind of crawl into your little shell and try to avoid certain things, and maybe that'll cost you the game? It's scary sometimes to play that cut or play a certain move, but if you don't exercise this kind of courage, you may not be able to improve, because we do need to expand our boundaries. We need to test the waters. We need to go reach for the stars, and we need to play moves that we're not always comfortable with playing, and then we'll learn what those moves actually mean. And finally, I have patience. Are you greedy? Can you keep calm during the game when nothing is happening? When it's very boring, are you able to just wait patiently until the opportunity comes? Or are you in a rush to do things? Are you in a rush to play forcing moves? Are you in a rush to invade? Or can you take it slowly? I had a Go teacher who told me that Go is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And whoever runs the marathon better wins at the end. Whoever makes every stone count. And one time I was going through this phase of trying to make my play more solid and try to play more patiently without trying to rush to kill other people's stones. And I was playing this way, and I was just keeping my group safe and keeping things steady. And I had not even realized that my opponent's giant group in the corner was completely without a base, without eyes. And I did not even try to kill that group. It just happened that way, because everything that I had was stable and solid and healthy, and my opponent was not taking care of their own groups enough. So that one group in the corner was just neglected by both of us, and I really didn't have to do any killing at all. It just died because of the overcrowding of everything else. And I learned that day, like, wow, patience really pays off. Sometimes you just have to wait, and things will happen regardless of whether you try to make them happen or not. So those are some of the mental, psychological aspects of the game that I was able to come up with. I'm sure there's a lot more discussion and a lot more psychological stuff that we could talk about. So I'm curious to know what kind of psychological aspects of the game that you listeners can think of. So if you have any ideas about that, please let me know. This episode of Starpoint is the last episode of 2023, and it's been quite a year, or half a year. I don't remember what month I started this podcast in, but it surely has surpassed my expectations. I wasn't sure where I was going with it when I first started it, but it seems that there are a good handful of you who appreciate listening to Go content, even though there's no Go board to look at. And so I'm very thankful to all of you. Some updates on how the show is doing. We got over 100 subscribers on YouTube, which is a milestone we passed a few weeks ago, which is great. And Spotify Unwrapped has given me some interesting data about all of you listeners out there. We've got some country information as to what countries are most popular, and the US definitely takes the cake. Makes sense. I'm in the US, so 53% of my listeners in the US, and some of the top countries after that are Germany, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, the Netherlands, Sweden, France, Norway, Austria, and Spain. So we've got mostly European listeners out there, but we do have listeners in other continents as well. So that's really awesome to just imagine this show being listened to in all sorts of different parts of the world. And our top episode of the year is Go Etiquette, Rudeness, and Metagaming. So maybe it's a popular thing to listen to some gossip and stories of etiquette violations. It's a spicy topic. So maybe I'll review that topic again in a future episode if more spicy details come up in the world of Go etiquette. Starpoint was the top 10 podcast for 106 people, according to Spotify Unwrapped. And Spotify includes all the other podcast platforms that it makes it available to. So if you're listening to it, the show on any of those other platforms, you're included in these numbers, I believe. And top 5 podcasts for Starpoint was 83. Sorry. Starpoint was a top 5 podcast for 83 people, and it was the number 1 podcast for 29 people. So, you guys could be just people who just don't listen to podcasts and happen to pick up Starpoint, and that is your only podcast. But even if it is, that is incredible. So thank you so much for all of you who have made Starpoint a part of your routine. I have some updates on the poll that I did a couple episodes back on your skill level, and I have some information on the skill level of our listeners here, and it makes sense that about 50% of you are SDKs, because I think SDK is where you're definitely in the hobby. You're pretty you're pretty passionate about the game to get to that level, and so you're probably the type of person to look for more Go content. But that's not all of you. We do have a good amount of DDKs, so about 40, 45%. I guess the rest of you are DDKs pretty much. You got a couple Dawn level players, but it's mostly SDK and some DDK. And then a little bit of Dawn level players. No pro listeners yet. Just thought it was a funny poll option that I'd throw out. Maybe there would have been a single pro somewhere in the shadows. But that's, so I'm keep that in mind for sure into future episodes to know where my listeners are at. And for this end of the year episode, I wanted to do a little bit of self-reflection and tell you a bit about my Go journey this year. And, on paper, it sounds pretty good. At the beginning of the year, in January, I was a Fox 3Q and an OGS 6Q. Now I'm a Fox 1 Dan and OGS 3Q. That sounds like great progress, but if you if you drill down into the details, I actually made Fox 1 Dan in February, so like a month after, and I made OGS 3Q in July. So it's been a bit stagnant, but hey, if you just look at the whole year, it's great progress. I'm going to continue to see how I can break out of this plateau. But other noteworthy things about this year for me is I went to one tournament and I played against a pro for the first time. If you want to hear about that, that is in episode number 1 of Starpoint, where I played against Kenro Osawa. And I want to do a little message to myself. If this podcast is still going strong next year, I'll try to come back to this episode and just see where I'm at and react to and maybe answer some questions that I had about my future self. And so my future self, I want to ask, well, do you still play on OGS or Fox? Or have you branched out to other servers? Have you tried KGS yet? Because I've been meaning to try KGS, and it's just hard to, because I have all my like invested time in the other servers, and I like that I have this like established rank, and I want to work on that. So it's hard to shift sometimes. And I've also been meaning to try to give PandaNet a try. So I'm wondering if you're still stuck with the same old servers or if you've branched out. I'm wondering, have you gone to any more tournaments and how those have gone? Has your AGA rating changed? My AGA rating is at 5Q right now, I think, since the last one that I went to. So I'm wondering, have you gone to any more tournaments? Have you gone out to any more club meetings in the past year? I have visited, as I've mentioned, the Mission Viejo Go Club a couple times. It would be nice to visit again, but it is a little far for me. So we'll see if I can drop in at some point later on in the next year. What else? Let me think. Have you learned any new Joseki? I've learned a few Joseki this year. And it's been fun. I do have to spend a considerable amount of time to make sure I can memorize the moves of the Joseki, and then even more time to try to apply them to my games. I have another question, which is, what opening are you playing right now? Because this past year, at some point, I played only star points, because I realized I like fighting and I like influence, and double star point started to work out pretty well for me. But then I think when I transitioned over to the OGS games, I noticed that opponents are a lot more careful with their groups, and it's less advantageous, I think, for me to use the star point opening. So I've been trying, because I've been losing on points. So I'm like, maybe I should try playing more territorially. So I've actually switched completely to double 3/4s. So I'm curious where that is right now. Like, where are your openings at? And do you still play, like, do you still play star points, or do you play 3/4s? What other questions do I have for myself here? I don't know. I don't really know if I have any other things that I can think of. Did you buy any more Go books? I can almost guarantee the answer is yes to that question. It's hard to think about because I don't need any more Go books. But how about this? How about more questions about my own personal game? If you could talk to yourself now in order to improve, what do you think I should do? What am I lacking? What am I weak on? What should I do? And is there something that I'm currently unable to see that you know about? It's hard to comment on that without looking at my games, probably hard for you to remember where you were at. Maybe just grab a game from this era and see what kind of play I'm making. But I'm very curious to know where my Go understanding is. a year from now, because a year ago I feel like, sometimes you learn so much and yet your rank doesn't change, and I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't improve. Sometimes it takes a while for your rank to catch up to the stuff you've learned, and so if you've been stuck for a while like I have, don't lose heart, because sometimes it takes a while for those skills to cook underneath, and finally you learn enough to break out of that plateau. So those are some of the questions I have for myself in a year. Might be interesting to look back and answer those. And to the to the listeners, I want to kind of challenge you to see if you can create some kind of New Year's resolution for Go. I'm not much of a New Year's resolution person. I don't really believe in making New Year's resolutions, because I think we should just do what we aim to do when whatever time of year it is. But I do know that when we make New Year's resolutions, that we should be very concrete in terms of our goals. We shouldn't just say, I'm going to exercise more this year. We should say, I'm going to start going to the gym 3 times a week. Very, very concrete. And it's even better if you can say, I'm going to go to the gym on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at this time. I mean, you don't have to go that far, but the more specific you are with your goals and what you're going to do about them, the more likely it is that you're going to actually do something about those things. If you're just very vague, as in, I'm going to read more, instead of saying, I'm going to try to read a book a month, it's less likely to be something that you do, because it's not something you're going to think about on a day-to-day basis. So applying that to Go, don't just say, I'm going to become a Dawn player this year. What are you going to do in order to do that? I haven't really thought much about what I'm going to try to do. I think the things I've tried to do was I just make myself play more games. I would say, like, every night, if I have time, I'm going to play a game. Or if every night I'm going to play, or like I'm going to play a game one night, and then the next night I will review it in detail, and so on and so forth. And so maybe this time is a good time for me to try to see if I can make some kind of life and death commitment, like the life and death problem, and put some time into that and actually carve out some time. So I might do something like that as my New Year's resolution for Go, because it's probably the most concrete way to improve your game, is to improve your life and death knowledge. So even just like 10 minutes a day of life and death study, maybe something that I can do this year. So let's see if that's something that I can stick to. And I do want to also throw out a question. So besides the New Year's resolution, I would love to know what's your New Year's resolution for Go this year, for improvement or for enjoyment, or maybe it has something to do with your emotions and your mental game. But another question that I have for you is, what do you want more of out of Starpoint? I think this is something I'd love to know more about as well, so I can help better create content for you. What do you want more of on the show? What have you liked on the show? What have you felt like, maybe you don't really need on the show? Let me know, so I can shape the show to what all of you want. And that's what I want for wait, what? That's what I want to do for all of you. So please write in, don't hesitate. And we're going to move on to the DDK Advice Corner. So it's time for the DDK Advice Corner, and the tip of the day is Hane. It's a very, very, very simple tip, but Hane. Hane is oftentimes the first move that should be considered, but it's a very, very strong move. It's probably one of the more aggressive moves, but we know the Go proverb, you should Hane in response to an attach. And yeah, that's true. But I think the Hane is oftentimes just the appropriate move in many situations, especially when you're strong. And I just think that a lot of DDKs should consider the Hane more. And I understand you want to make things less complicated. That doesn't mean to Hane all the time. But I want you to consider the Hane. Think about the Hane first. Try Hane. And if it looks really dicey and it looks like a bad idea, like you're leaving behind a lot of weaknesses, then don't do it, right? And I think that's probably why a lot of DDKs don't Hane, because they have learned that they've Haned over and over again, and they've learned that, oh, I lose because I get cut. I have weaknesses. So you know what? From now on, I'm not going to Hane. I'm going to extend. I'm going to play solid. I'm going to connect. And that's great. That's a definite right step in the right direction. But now we need to go back to considering the Hane. Think about the strongest move that you want to play, and then scale it down from there. Instead of going from conservative to aggressive, go from aggressive, and then learn about the problems from the aggressive moves, scale it back again and again and again for every move. So that's my quick tip of the day for the DDKs, and it's time to go into some Go news. The 46th Myeongin, because I have a correction to make from episode 14. I covered the Myeongin in that episode as well, but I said that Shin Jinseo won the Myeongin in that episode, but that was actually the consolation final versus Park Jong-won. And in the actual final, Shin Jinseo was up against Byun Sang-il, and well, I wasn't wrong. Shin Jinseo won 2-1 against Byun Sang-il for the 46th Myeongin title. And as I've mentioned before, the Myeongin is the equivalent of the Japanese Meijin, but in Korea. We also have the 28th LG Cup that I mentioned last episode, and Shin Jinseo versus Gu Zihao. Shin Jinseo versus Gu Zihao in the semifinals. Michael Redmond reviewed this game, so I'll try to give a link to you guys in the description. And Shin Jinseo came out the winner as the finalist for the next round, and Byun Sang-il defeated Wang Xinghao to become a finalist for the next round. So it will be Shin Jinseo versus Byun Sang-il again, as it was in the Myeongin. So we'll see if Byun Sang-il can take this one from Shin Jinseo this time. And the 40th Go Congress, the US Go Congress, has been announced in terms of the dates as July 13th to the 21st, and it will be in Portland, Oregon, and registration will begin in January. So keep an eye out for that. In the European world, the Go Baron was decided, and Lucas Podpera was the previous Go Baron and had defended the title against Jan Simara 1P. And that is a Czech title. The Go Baron is a Czech title where the finals are played between the holder of the title and it's the new challenger, and it's a best of 5 match. And Lucas Podpera had defended the Go Baron title. The 43rd World Amateur Go Championship results have come in, and Kim Jong-sun of Korea has won the title with 7 wins, a 7-win sweep. Second place was China's 14-year-old Yang Chukun, and they had 6 wins and 1 loss. And third place from Taipei, 5 wins and 2 losses, named Lai Yu Cheng. And Japan was 4th. A Japanese player named Kurita Yoshiki. And in 5th place, we got a U.S. player named Alan Huang. So that was the 43rd World Amateur Go Championship. And Alexander Dinnerstein has won the Chinese Ambassador Cup in Moscow against Ilya Shikshin. And as we know, Ilya is one of the strongest players in Europe, arguably the strongest Western player. Just currently, and Alexander Dinnerstein has taken the Chinese Ambassador Cup, and it's quite a challenging endeavor to defeat Ilya Shikshin, because Ilya Shikshin has lost, I think, like 2 games in tournaments since 2021, according to Alexander Dinnerstein. And Alexander Dinnerstein, if you recognize that name, he also goes by Breakfast, and he's also a content creator for Go Magic. He has some great classes on there. And I thought he made a very interesting comment about in the article that he wrote up for the Chinese Ambassador Cup. Let me read it to you. As you probably know, I like peaceful Go, playing usually without too much risk and complications. 50 moves Fuseki, 200 moves Yosei. That's what I do most of the time. With Ilya, this strategy doesn't work anymore. That sounds like the most exhausting kind of Go to me, but maybe it's a kind of Go to maybe get better at for me to improve. But I just thought that was an interesting way to characterize your style, which is like 50 moves Fuseki and 200 moves Yosei. But that's going to do it for Go News, and we are going to go into listener mail. Our friend Ben Kyo has left us another rich comment on the strategy versus tactics episode, and I would even go as far to say this is almost like a mini article or blog. Speaking of which, Ben Kyo is launching a new blog called Ben Kyo's Baduk Journal, which will be featured on the US Go or AGA website, usgo.org. If you just go to the website and go to click the blog tab, you'll find it there. No posts as of yet, but I assume that we can expect something there very, very soon. So Ben Kyo wrote, sometimes it's even the lack of technical ability that prevents learning some strategic parts. For example, when it comes to a plan that involves surviving inside the opponent's moyo, or on the flip side, if we need to attack effectively using leaning, splitting, or other related strategies. When people lack the technical ability for it and experience disasters, it sometimes discourages them from trying those strategies in the future. Instead of improving on the tactics involved, they give up on the entire strategies. And at the end of the day, they can end up lacking both sides of the coin for getting to the next level, both tactical skills and strategy, as a result of lacking the technical skills. I agree wholeheartedly. I talked about strategy and tactics kind of as two different things in that episode, but really they're very, very much tied to each other, and they're married with one another. And your like tactical knowledge feeds into your strategy, and your strategy feeds into your tactics, and they're very much at play with one another. So yeah, you're gonna need both. Like as I said in the episode, they're very much tied to each other. Another thing Ben Kyo has said in his comment was, outside of Go, I'm a very big picture type of person and neglect details, so it's another way that Go has forced me to fight against myself. We're always doing that though. Go wants us to push our very humanity aside in many ways. Every time we play, most of us get caught up in all sorts of logical fallacies, such as sunk cost fallacy and many others. We also have trouble sacrificing, whether it be stones, territories, plans. I can say with certainty that my Go journey has been about doing away with these things and learning to be completely cold and detached from stones and territories, willing to trade anything away. Even plans we put tons of thought and reading into should be discarded within a single move's notice, and new reading and planning done over and over. You get used to it though. It's not as tiring as it sounds once you get used to reading things out constantly. It's important for reading mode to always be on. Most players only read when necessary and treat it like an on-off switch. That's, I can't agree more. There's a lot of points that you made in there, Ben Kyo, especially that last one, that you always have to have your reading mode on. I do feel like when I play Go, I turn it on and off, and that's probably not good, and that's probably why I miss a bunch of stuff that I do during the game. And I also like what you said about sacrificing things, because that is a tough lesson to learn, because sacrifice is something that doesn't pay off immediately. It's something that pays off later on. And so this like delayed gratification thing is just very uncomfortable for us as humans to learn about. And it does kind of relate to the topic of today's episode with flexibility. Another thing that I progressed throughout the year was my ability to sacrifice stones, because I wrote to myself in my own journal that I have trouble sacrificing 4 or more stones, because it just seemed really hard to justify sacrificing that many stones. But I got used to it over the year, and I got to a point where I was sacrificing too much, and I needed to dial it back. But it's an incredible way. Like Go is an incredible way to grow as a person, because it challenges you to get through these uncomfortable moments to better yourself. So there's more to the comment that Ben Kyo wrote. So if you want to check it out, go on YouTube, the strategy versus tactics episode on Starpoint. I believe someone also forwarded the comment over onto the Reddit post. But anyway, thank you so much for your comment, Ben. It's always an interesting read. And then another comment we got from Miguel Fuentes New US says, my personality is more conducive to strategy than tactics. I've been focusing on tactics to balance my style. What do you think? Should we do what comes naturally or focus on covering weakness? That's a very deep question, and I think that there's a lot of things to say about whether we should try to play to our strengths or to try to fix our weaknesses. I think that there is a fundamental amount, like my 2 cents on this topic is, I think that there's a basic amount of effort that we do need to give our weaknesses so that we do understand fundamentally certain things that are very, very crucial and critical to those concepts. For example, if you are more of a strategy person and you're weak on tactics, there is an amount that you should be investing on tactics, but my personal opinion is that you should always play to your strengths and that you should try to focus on what you're good at and try to hone your skill in that matter, and things will serve that. Like the tactics that you learn will serve your strengths, but I do think you do need to spend a good amount of time to just kind of get at least the bases covered. If you have a big gaping weakness in your play, sometimes those are the easiest ways to improve, to fix those up. But I wouldn't say spend too much time to just really focus on that weakness. That's just my opinion on it. I think there's a lot of different takes that could be out there regarding this topic. It's a very interesting topic on what we should focus on. And again, as I've discussed earlier in Ben Kyo's comment, these 2 things are very much related to another, and they're very, very tied to each other. So you can't really avoid either of them. But thanks for the very insightful question, Miguel Fuentes. And so the question of the week is, I've got a bunch of questions of the week for you if you need any thing to think about when you're writing a little comment here on wherever you're listening. Did I miss any mental aspect of the game today in this episode? And how do you feel about your mental game? How do you feel about the things that I talked about earlier regarding flexibility, consistency, confidence, things like that? I want to know how your psychological world of Go is. And another question I have is, what do you plan on doing for the new year in Go? Do you have a game plan? Do you have any resolutions? Is there a goal that you're trying to hit? What happened to your goal from last year if you had one? Let me know wherever you're listening, whether it's on Reddit. I mean, you're not listening on Reddit, but there's a post that I post on Reddit. And someone was actually kind enough to post my last episode because I was a little late there. It's really nice to see someone pick up my slack there, so thank you so much. I will cover the comments on that episode in the next one. But whether you're on Reddit or YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, there's a way to comment and contribute to the episode with some feedback. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And you can also shoot an email to starpointbaduk@gmail.com. That's starpoint, BADUK @gmail.com. If you want to support Starpoint, just, I don't know, drop a like or subscribe or do whatever, you know the deal. Well, thanks for listening. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Keep playing Go.